Hello everyone, this is Obscure Nick here with a new video. And today we are going to talk about Full House star Candace Cameron Bure and how on her podcast she just recently revealed about the time she got lured to an inappropriate underground party. So, as you know, let's deep dive and thrive. So, as some of you may or may not know who Candace Cameron Bure is, she played DJ Tanner on the hit ABC show Full House. It was part of the regular 1980s, 1990s TGIF lineup, and was for 8 seasons from about 1987 to 1995, which also starred Bob Saget, John Stamos, Jodie Sweetin, and the Olsen twins. Now, Candace also had a subsequent career after Full House. She starred in the spin-off Fuller House, which she also had a big part behind the scenes in production and everything, and making that show come to life. And she was a guest star on That's So Raven. She was also a co-host on The View for one season and a guest co-host the prior season back in 2015, 2016. And she's also known in Hollywood for being a devout Christian. Her and her family, specifically her and her brother Kirk Cameron, are known for being religious, and they usually have a lot of controversial views that are not to the status quo of Hollywood necessarily, but they've managed to have made a career and sustain a career for so many years since. Now, after Full House, Candace Cameron did some movies such as Freshman Fall, She Said No, and No One Would Tell. One of those movies starred Mike Paul Gosselaar from Saved by the Bell, and the other movie, No One Would Tell, had Fred Savage. And these movies were like college horror films. They were TV movies. And in these movies, Candace's camera would ultimately get taken off. You know, I don't want to say the word here on YouTube, but I think we all know what that means. And as well, there is a cloud of suspicious behavior around Fred Savage, one of her co-stars, who played a psychopath in one of these TV movies. But what's interesting enough is that Candace Cameron Bure opened up about how her and her husband at the time, I think this sounded like it was like from the 90s, when they were newly married, because there was a period of time in Candace's career when she was just raising children and stuff, and she wasn't doing anything in the industry. So she did these TV movies and then had children after these TV movies, and I'm guessing it's from around the same time. And so Candace opens up about how she had this friend that asked her and her husband to go to this party, and it turned out to be an underground sex party. Now, we don't know who this friend is of Candace's, but as soon as she got to the party, her and her husband, they took a U-turn out and immediately left.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing your embarrassing
I mean, what about
story.
you? I don't want to put you on the line with an embarrassing story, but like, have you seen that to be true of like when you hang around certain people, you're like, oh, they kind of pull out maybe the worst of me or the best of me?
Of course. I mean, listen, I have some really weird, embarrassing moments, although I shouldn't say embarrassing. For me, they are more shameful of going to places where I thought like, oh, this person's a friend and I'm going to be cool and do this. And I went to a party once with Val because we were married, and it ended up being this underground party that was an S&M like sex thing that was so dark and demonic. And we walked in and my eyeballs were popping out of my head because I saw stuff I've never seen before in my life. And I'm looking at Val going like, how are we here? What is happening? And the one person that invited us, but we made a hard U-turn and walked right out of there. And it just was like so slimy and weird. And I was like, we're going to pause before we ever say yes to going out with that friend again. We just had no idea what we were walking into. And it was so disgusting and gross.
So I want to know, like, was this party connected to Epstein? Because it's just interesting timing of her opening up about this around the time of the Epstein files being released, and how these types of things, people are being more open about this. Even like Raven Simone opened up on a podcast about a month ago or so saying how she was at some mansion parties and how the mansion parties were kind of the most dangerous types of parties in Hollywood. So, because a lot of powerful people, and also the whole thing about do not drink out of the punch bowl. And I can say, as someone who's been part of this industry, has always been told by my own peers and my own colleagues, never drink out of the punch bowl at a mansion party in California. So that's a pretty common thing. And it sounds like Candace was in one of those situations. And thank God she also had her husband there with her, you know, as a form of protection, because I feel when women tend to go alone to these parties, they tend to get manipulated or just kind of peer pressured into doing things they don't want to do when they're singled out, especially if it's more of a male dominating environment. So I'm happy about that. And people, again, make fun of Candace Cameron and even Kirk Cameron, and I would love to deep dive on Kirk Cameron a bit, because they're both very religious, and I can understand why. And actually after this, I think Candace became more religious. I believe she describes herself as a born-again Christian, which those people tend to have distanced themselves from God at some point, but then they come back to it and they initiate themselves back into Catholicism or whichever religion they may be, and they get baptized again, or there's some sort of form of them coming to terms with God again, essentially. But it makes sense why Candace and Kirk Cameron are religious and went to that, because they probably utilize that as a form of protection against these sorts of things in Hollywood. And I feel, I get there's a lot of controversies with religion itself and Catholicism, and especially with things done in the church and stuff. I understand that. At the same time, there is a group of people that have found protection through it, if that makes sense. And it's not as an excuse to enable bigotry, but it gives us a comprehensive form to understand why someone may be the way they are. And there may not, even the context of it may not necessarily be like they're coming from a homophobic and transphobic place, but a traumatic place. And that's a conversation I think we need to extend further and try to meet with people that we think differently than us and meet them at their level, that in a way that they understand, and we meet them at a level, they meet us at a level that we can understand. But something that people need to note on the topic of Kirk Cameron is he was surrounded by a lot of people in Hollywood too that were not so great of people. On Growing Pains, the dialogue coach was Brian Peck. And as you guys know, with the Quiet on Set documentary and the Drake Bell of it all, of who Brian Peck is, he's a convicted sex offender with minors. And Drake Bell was one of the victims of him. So back in 2004, and we all know the story of that. So it makes sense why Kirk Cameron would be the way it is. And it makes me question, it's people of a certain age, because I feel the 1980s had a lot of child stars where a lot of this happened very openly, with places like Alfie Soda Club, and as you know, of like Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, River Phoenix, all were hanging out in that crowd of that time. And this is also the same era of when Candace Cameron Bure and Kirk Cameron were child stars, same sort of era. So there's a lot of child stars from this era where it would be understandable why they come off the way they do, because they're coming again from a place of trauma. And again, it's not to excuse bigotry, because we should not be allowing that whatsoever, but it gives us clarity on an understanding of why they've said certain things in the past that are very out of touch, these child stars, certain child stars, because of the background that matched it, essentially, that, you know, they had no way else of responding from it. And so it makes me question if something happened to another figure, would be like Mario Lopez, that has similar views to Candace and Kirk Cameron, that comes to mind, again, from the same era of Alfie Soda Club. We really got to start having more open conversations and stop saying what and start asking why. Why are they thinking this way? What happened to them is the real question. So that's what I wanted to report on today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the overall situation about what Candace revealed here. And I want to give a shout out to Candace Cameron Bure's podcast, where this piece of media came from. So shout out to the Candace Cameron Bure podcast. And we're sending much love, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.